Conversations on race and policing began in response to the police killing of George Floyd on May 25, 2020. In this partnership between CSU San Bernardino and the Brennan Center for Justice, we hope to engage in ongoing discussions related to the history and current context of race, policing, and criminal justice with guests from diverse academic fields and backgrounds.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our conversation on race and policing. I wanted to, before we begin our conversation, start with our land acknowledgement. Um, Here at California State University, San Bernardino, we acknowledge that the land on which our San Bernardino faculty or facility is sited is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mariam, commonly referred to as the Serrano people, which in the contemporary era are represented by two federally recognized Indian tribes, the Yuviatam of San Manuel Nation and the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. Our histories and stories are intertwined in this space, and by sharing them in culturally appropriate ways, we honor and celebrate our Indigenous neighbors and partners. Since 1965, CSUSB's development has benefited and will continue to benefit and utilize resources, and we recognize this. Along with this land acknowledgement, this university affirms tribal sovereignty and our responsibility to work with these tribes to further mutual respect and gratitude for all those involved. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jeremy, for our introductions.
Thanks, Amber. Our guest today, I'm very grateful for us doing this somewhat impromptu event in our series. Our guests are Shannon Gibney, Myrl Beam, and Kat Brooks. Shannon Gibney is a writer, educator, and activist. She's author of many books, including The Girl I Am, Was, and Never Will Be, a speculative memoir of transracial adoption, which received a Michael L. Printz Honor and a Minnesota Book Award. Also, See No Color and Dream Country, both of which are winners of the Minnesota Book Awards. Where We Come From, co-authored, winner of 2023 Carter G. Woodson Award, Sam and the Incredible African and American Food Fight, and We Miss You, George Floyd. A Bush artist and McKnight writing fellow, Gibney teaches at Minneapolis College, where she was named Educator of the Year in 2023. And she lives with her two children in Minneapolis, where she is a sanctuary school team lead with Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, MFPS. And that affiliation also applies to our second guest, Dr. Myrl Beam, is a teacher, scholar, and organizer based in South Minneapolis. He is an associate professor and the chair of the Women's Gender Sexuality Studies Department at Macalester College, the author of the book Gay Inc., The Non-Profitization of Queer Politics. He is an oral historian that focuses on queer and trans movements for justice. Beam is currently working on a collaborative public history project called The Long Fire at Lake and Minnehaha that uses community oral history to explore the interconnected histories of activism that gave rise to the uprising in 2020. That project was named the winner of the 2024 Arcus Places Prize, which celebrates public scholarship on the relationship between gender, sexuality, and the built environment. Beam lives in South Minneapolis with his partner and two kids, where he organizes also with the Minneapolis Families for Public Schools. We'll share links for these books and both Myrl and Shannon's websites. Our third guest is Kat Brooks, host of Law and Order on KPFA, and a longtime performer, organizer, and activist. She played a central role in the struggle for justice for Oscar Grant and spent the last decade working with impacted communities and families to rapidly respond to police violence and radically transform the ways our communities are policed and incarcerated. She's the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project, APTP, and the executive director of the Justice Teams Network. Kat was also the runner-up in Oakland's 2018 mayoral election, facing incumbent Libby Schaaf. While the group discusses, I'll also be sharing links to Kat's materials, and Kat has joined us, I think, 4 times now in the series, so is always an inspiration and a source of excitement and energy for us when she can join. Myrl, Shannon, Kat, thank you so much for joining for this conversation from Minnesota to California, and taking stock and understanding what it is that we're facing here. So I want to open it up. I have some points for discussion. Amber, do you want to lead us off with some questions, or shall I?
Sure, I can go ahead and start. Thank you, Jeremy, for that beautiful introduction of all of our guests. I think my first question would be for Shannon and Myrl. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing in Minneapolis in the past few days or weeks in terms of the federal agent presence? And have the announced changes or reductions in federal agent presence been noticeable at all?
I see Myrl's handing it off to me. I was going to hand it off to him, but that's okay. We'll go back and forth, I'm sure. Yeah, this has been probably my most difficult time in Minneapolis. I've lived here for about 23 years. It's also the time, I've been saying that I have been the most proud of being a Black woman here, a Black woman Minnesotan. I have not always, I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I have not always, been happy when people identified me as a Minnesotan because of some of the, Minnesota nice and, whiteness of the state that it kind of refused to acknowledge many of its people. But this crisis has really, I feel like, brought out the best of people in the state as we're facing the worst of these agents coming in to our communities and just, ripping families apart. We have 7,000 students in Minneapolis public schools who are now on online and virtual learning. They just extended that through April. I have every reason to believe that they're going to extend it through the rest of the year. And that's because, parents and in some cases, kids are getting snatched by ICE agents on their way to and from school. And so we know from the pandemic that virtual learning is not ideal for most kids and teens in terms of mental health issues, in terms of actual learning. But we also know it's much better than having your family torn apart. So these are the impossible choices that this region is facing right now. I have there's something called the Mercado Central, which probably anybody who speaks Spanish knows means the central market. That is about a block from my house in South Minneapolis. It's kind of an institution in the area. There's tons of kiosks where local vendors, mostly South American, but not all, sell everything from tacos to little tchotchkes to, everything. And they, because of the ICE presence, they're now at least $500,000, I'm sure more, underwater. And so I just saw a report in the Star Tribune, which is like the main paper in our main, let's say, mainstream paper in our region. There was a report yesterday that said that, not surprisingly, the housing construction market is underwater. And yeah, all these, it's like this cascading thing. The longer it goes on, if they first arrived in December and, I think it was somewhere around 300 agents were here and they were causing problems. They were causing a lot of problems, but I kind of felt, and, of course I want to hear Myrl's perspective on this, but I felt like we were kind of meeting the challenge in terms of our organizing against them, in terms of rapid response patrols, in terms of mutual aid, providing food and rent support for folks. And all kinds of other things, driving kids to school, to and from school. And just to give people some context, Minneapolis is about a third the size of Chicago. I believe at the height of the surge in Chicago, they had like 500 or 600 agents. Um, and so, I mean, just to understand, and our Minneapolis Police Department has 600, right? So that's sort of like the scale of what we're dealing with here. And then, of course, in January, they announced that they were then going to deploy 3,000 agents here. And so then, since then, we've been trying to, meet the challenges and the chaos and the violence that all those agents are causing, not just in the urban core. Myrl and I live in kind of the epicenter of ICE activity. But they're all over the state, now. They're and increasingly in suburbs. As of course a city dweller, it's very familiar, and also kind of obnoxious to hear sort of some of these like suburban rural folks leaders say, oh, if only, Minneapolis would just get along with ICE and, like work with them or whatever. And it's like, um, they're finding out, the whole state is finding out, right? There was a report, I think it was like a month ago now, of ICE agents who went to Wilmer, Minnesota, which is a very small rural community, and they went to a Mexican restaurant there. There are actually a lot of Latino men who work for ICE, yeah, so they want Mexican food, and so they went to Mexican. They went to this Mexican restaurant in Wilmer, and the servers served them, and then after that, they went and arrested them and detained them. And the community was like up in arms, right? And then we have, of course, now the whole country knows about Columbia Heights, which is a small suburb of the Twin Cities, where the young boy, the 5-year-old boy, was used as bait to get his father there. And I think that school district had like 4 kids that were taken. I could go on. I'm going to let Myrl talk at this point, right as he was about to take a drink, because that's just the kind of person that I am. But it is definitely, it is a state of emergency, all hands on deck. Everybody is doing something that I know in my circle, whether it's standing for patrols around schools and drop off and pick up, whether it's becoming a food buddy. My son's school, we have 250 vulnerable families that are matched with ally families, and we bring them food once or twice a week, depending on their needs. We have so many GoFundMes, mostly for rental support. We're pushing for an eviction moratorium because, of course, people can't work, because if they go outside, they'll be snatched. So there's just like a lot of things going on that I think also people are like, I mean, this is definitely a blue state, but that doesn't mean that there's like, people have, there's plenty of Republicans here too, like in rural areas and whatever. But I think people understand that this is a human rights issue. It's not a partisan issue.
Yeah, I echo everything that Shannon just said. I maybe just to, I feel like probably everyone who's here is reading, is following, but it's worth maybe just because this is going to be recorded, just to like sort of capture for a moment, just like what it's like on a daily level, right? Like 3,000 ICE officers. So for Shannon and I, who live in South Minneapolis, what it is like in some ways is, it's just constant. You can't move through a day or an hour or even really a minute without an awareness that they're trying to take somebody, that your neighbors are, following after them in their Honda Fits and with their with our elaborate signal groups of, like plate check on this, and with like 70-year-old Lutheran ladies being like, plate is Alpha, Dog, Thomas, 123, and then being re-educated about what the, Army letter thing is that you're supposed to do on the signal threads. And in that sense, as Shannon is, like enormously proud of my community and my neighbors. And also, it's just traumatizing, like it's just constant and grueling. And, you wake up nearly every day to the sound of whistles and horns. And even as you are proud of your people, that means that they're trying to take somebody. And in South Minneapolis, the response is so significant that actually, like at the moment, a lot of the abductions are happening either in the suburbs where rapid response takes longer because people are physically more disparate from one another, or in neighborhoods that have a greater degree of impacted people to the number of people who are safe enough to be following them around, right? Like we live in a neighborhood where there is enough of us who are safe to be able to be driving our Honda Fits around, right? But that's not true all over the city. So a lot of the abductions have shifted over north. They've shifted to the east side of St. Paul. Um, and, like I was chatting with my 7-year-old's best friend's dad, lives a few blocks south of us, who was saying that his neighbor was unloading his groceries when ICE, like careens onto the block, chasing somebody. That guy gets away. And then there are just all these guys, these ICE guys standing in the middle of the street. They see my kid's dad's neighbor unloading his groceries, and they all just sort of like turn to him and see him as a brown man unloading his groceries and just like descend, and he's just like, what the fuck, he races inside. All of the like observers get out and are able to, are whistling and honking. The guy gets inside and they load themselves back up in their rented SUVs and move on. It's just everywhere you encounter empty cars, and you feel like I feel like I know what happened there. That's probably happened to me 6 or 7 times, that I'm driving home from somewhere and there's just an empty car. Um, every day our kids and the kids of our neighbors are. I was driving home. ICE came once again to our kids' school. Shannon and I have kids who go to the same elementary school, 2 blocks from George Floyd Square. Um, ICE had come to the school in the middle of the day, and just they circle schools. And on the one hand, I mean, like, I think they are trying to go after parents, but it's the middle of the day. I think also they are terrorizing, right? Um, all of the schools have set up patrols. So we have patrols at drop off and at pickup. And then now the school has asked us to stand up patrol during recess. So from like 11 to 2 p.m. It was the first time that the kids heard the whistles. For the first week after Renee Good was killed, very close to our school, they all had indoor recess. And so the kids weren't aware of the sound of the whistles during the day. And they had to have indoor recess because of all of the pepper spray, all of the chemical munitions that were in the air. And so on this day, it was the first day that they heard the whistles and that they knew ICE was close. And so the teachers hustled everybody inside, and there were observers who, busted out of their houses all around the school. But I was driving like 6 kids home, my kids, a couple other neighbor kids, a couple kids that I have been regularly giving rides to. And, then the kids are having this conversation about like, well, they won't take kids, right? It just like wrecks you. It just wrecks you to talk with them about like actually kids have been taken and are being taken. And it's not like these kids, these are uprising kids who were all lived in South Minneapolis during 2020. They know. But it has been pretty brutal. I can sing the praises of the organizing that's in response to it and talk a little bit more about like how that has logistically unfolded so that it can be replicated in everywhere that it's going to need to be replicated. But I'll pause for a second and invite Kat to draw some connections for us. Or
That's why I was actually just going to ask Kat to join the conversation. as well. Thank you so much, Shannon and Myrl, for those notes. And Kat, if you want to speak in general terms about your experience organizing in the Oakland and the Bay Area, but also a little bit about the context, the sort of national context, and how these recent escalations, not just in Minneapolis but other cities as well, have fit into your experience and your ongoing work that others are doing in California and Oakland, the Bay Area, and other places. But also just a little bit of your thoughts on these comments from Shannon and Myrl, please.
Excuse my kitten. That may happen again. The first thing I want to say is to extend my solidarity and my care and support and at your service for whatever you all need in Minneapolis. We've been watching it very closely. Um, and now I'm trying to think about what to say that's helpful, right? And so not helpful to Minneapolis, but helpful for necessarily, but helpful for context. Yeah. Co-founder Terha Ak of APTP, Anti-Police Terror Project, says that the United States government has two modes of operation: smooth and soothe and smash and grab. Obama, Joe Biden were smooth and soothe. They were deporting people. Joe Biden, at the end of his term, was building private immigration detention centers very rapidly. It was almost like he was teeing up the ball for Donald Trump. Police violence ran rampant, anti-defund, anti-immigrant, anti-black, anti-poor, right? Look at the homelessness crisis that exploded across this country over the years of both of their terms. Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan, more smash and grab, right? So we're in a smash and grab period of American history. I wish that I could say that I was surprised at this moment that we're in, but I'm not at all whatsoever. We every year for the last 12 years, we have honored the radical legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. here in Oakland through teach-ins, rallies, vigils, right? So we sort of like brush aside the always repeated, often repeated refrain of "I have a dream" and remind people that he said that his dream had become a nightmare and that he was a freedom fighter that put his body on the line and sat in jail and broke the laws in order for what's right. And every year that we do that, reporters ask me, "Kat, what's significant about King Day this year?" And every year there's something to say, right? There's never been a year when I've been like, "Oh, it's good. We just, kicking it right now." There's always been there's always been something. And so, of course, the something this year was Minneapolis and Chicago and Tennessee and here, and I'll get to here shortly and what it looks like here. Um, but I had what felt like a real rookie aha, like an aha that I should have had every year, because the whole point of talking about King and reclaiming his legacy is to learn the lessons from the organizers at that time. I say a lot, you cannot organize adequately in the present if you do not understand your past. While organizing strategies and tactics have to shift for political conditions, there are certain truths that remain steady, right? This isn't organizing 101, so I won't get into all that. But I had this aha about the political conditions that existed when King was doing his work. Black people were swinging from trees. Indigenous folks were being hunted on their own land. Um, People were going to jail, being disappeared for the civil rights activism. Um, and this was in the North too, right? People want to talk about the South all the time. The North had black bodies swinging from trees as well. White vigilante mobs, right, were attacking folks for just being black, brown, indigenous, breathing. And so what I've been saying to people is while we are in a 21st century brand of smash and grab, America has always used violence and fear and intimidation and incarceration and death and murder to maintain the status quo. So because there's a lot of folks, right? That are in the streets going, I can't believe this is happening. This is not what America, this is absolutely what America is and always has been. And so what I am interested in, the conversation that I am interested in is not just reacting to this current moment. I actually, we have taken, we took, we're acting, we took a step back because there were plenty of people reacting. What I'm interested in and the work that we're doing here and is how we organize in this moment, not just to survive this moment and win, because I believe we are and we will, but how things look different when we get to the other side. I have absolutely no interest in the America that was. I am deeply invested in the America that can be, right? And in order for that to happen, we have to do more than just survive the chaos, those of us, and we have to take turns, right? So right now, the folks in Minneapolis are in the trenches. They are ground zero for the chaos in this country. I'll say a little bit more about, I have some thoughts about why Minneapolis and why very much Oakland probably next. Um, and organizers around the country who aren't in that, we have to be talking and we have to be strategizing, we have to be planning, and we have to be thinking about what sustainable mutual aid looks like. We have to think about what sustained general strikes look like, right? What do communities need to actually sit down and not cooperate for enough of a period of time that it makes a dent in billionaires' pocketbooks? Who's going to turn on the water when they turn it off? Who knows how to do wiring when they shut down electricity? Who knows how to grow the food, right? Which of your neighbors actually are street medics? Who can do like because that is what we have to be preparing for to get to the other side. And we have to stop asking the powers that be to intervene and fix this because they're not going to. And in a lot of ways they cannot. So those are the conversations that we're having here. Really quickly on Minneapolis, right? Donald Trump says a lot that he is their retribution, right? He is the retribution for all of the horrible things that have happened to white America in the last however many years, right? I did real hard being a white man, cisgendered white man in the States these days, but he has their back. He is the retribution, right? And some of us, including you, should have paid more attention to that word. Vengeance is his mode of operation. And so for a lot of reasons, including right the commerce corridor that exists between Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Chicago, right? That's important. What is also important is that 2020, as Myrl, referenced earlier, was the site of ignition of the largest response to state violence in the history of this country, right? Built on, it didn't just happen out of thin air, built on years of organizing, but that was where it happened. And so Minneapolis is in part paying for that. Minneapolis is in part being shut down to prevent, but they don't understand us. They don't understand freedom fighters. They don't understand that when you come at us like this, that we are built and trained to fight. But the intention is for it to be retribution for 2020. Oakland, where I'm at, has never stopped paying for being the birthplace of the Black Panther Party, ever. And continuing to be a vanguard for movements against state violence for the last 50 years, right? We are. They take out Oakland, right? They take out a lot. They take out a lot of leadership. They take out a lot of analysis. They take out a lot of freedom fighters. Um, so we're bracing, ourselves for here. But I think that that's really important, this idea of retribution. And also, how do we organize to win? That's the job of organizers, right? Unfortunately, that's one of the most bastardized words in the English language these days, organizers. My job, so about me, my job as an organizer is to work in solidarity with the people to address their needs and make a shift in material conditions. We cannot get to the other side of this and just have a new president and a kinder, gentler form of ice. I'll shut up now.
That's a lot. And thank you, Kat. And again, Kat's joined us, I think now 4 times in our series of discussions. And it's always bracing and urgent and essential. So thank you, Kat. Thank you, Myrl, and thank you, Shannon. I also want to introduce our fellow organizer, Stan Futch, who's joining us. And Stan, you had a question about the financing of these projects. Did you want to jump in?
No, I just know that it's cost the city, huge amounts of money, and things are shut down, like you were talking about the arcade and such. My question is, can you speak on the cost, the lost monies and revenues and so on that this has caused?
I mean, it's unfolding in real time now. So I think we're going into month 3 of the occupation. And so there are I don't know, Myrl might have like the more current numbers, but I mean it's definitely like numerically true, right? That like, I mean, you can track it in the numbers and the percentage, right, of folks who, are getting evicted, right? Like that's going up, of folks who, haven't reported to work in 3 months, that's going up. Of the numbers, it's not just Minneapolis Public Schools that's, has a virtual option now. But, St. Paul Public Schools, Anoka, Ramsey Public Schools, like all the big Osseo public schools, like they all have virtual options for kids too. And then we also have numbers on, like the city now, city of Minneapolis, they're trying to add $1 million to this rental relief fund, which is not nothing, but it's just like the tip of the iceberg of the emergency that we're in right now. And I mean, our organization, we're not really trying to, we don't want to get like negative attention for this, but I mean, we've raised a lot more money than that. And we've got sanctuary school leads, I think in about 50 schools now, 40 to 50. Even though, most of our work is focused on the 26 schools in the Minneapolis Public School District that have the most immigrant families and kids, and are the most vulnerable. But I mean, you can see, especially in those schools, right? Like there's like my son's high school, half of his high school is now online, 520 kids. And there's a school not far from where we live, where it's like 60 to 70% of the kids, are two schools, two elementary schools, 60 to 70% of the kids are just they're not there. And some of those kids are doing online, and some of them, it's just like, we don't know. We don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot. Like there's going to be a lot of things lost, and I think the economic cost, like I think most Minnesotans I know, like what really gets us up in the morning, even though we're exhausted, I mean, that's also something that I'm really wanting to hear, about, because okay, so what gets us up is this, like, is the moral cost of this, right? That like, I do feel like the logic of the Donald Trumps of the world, the MAGAs of the world, the techno-capitalists and fascists of the world is like, particularly applied to us here in Minnesota now, right? Particularly, especially to us, is like, you can either have your humanity or you can have your life. Like you have to choose, right? And like your humanity as understood as we're all connected, all of us, right? And so if I allow ICE to come in and to take my neighbor and to take their children, then that is actually a violation of the kind of person that I want to be. Like if and we've said no. Like we have emphatically said, like we will choose our humanity every time, and that is part of the campaign of vengeance and retribution that we're seeing in Minneapolis. And so and Minnesota in general. And so I do feel like, yeah, it definitely feels like that here. But I think the first 2 months I was much more sort of like, okay, things, there's always a new disaster coming, but we're sort of keeping things afloat. Now, month 3, nobody is giving in, nobody's going to give up, but we're tired, right? Like we're tired. Um, I know I have, I'm driving kids back and forth, I'm just speaking for myself, but everybody I know is doing too much, right? And, I have Ecuadorian family of 10 that I'm providing, food for. And that means like getting food from the food shelf as well as, I have people from other places sending me money to buy food, right? And then at the same time, like I'm flying to DC with the delegation tomorrow to talk to folks about the crisis that's going on here. Like, and then I'm a single mom, I've got 2 kids, right? I'm a professor. I'm like, it just, I love the idea, right, of mutual aid sustaining, sort of us creating alternatives to government, right? And the sort of like, let's say, like the Western political project, right? Which at least it hasn't played out this way at all, right? But at least in some of the documents, it's like, oh, okay, government is here to protect the people, right? It's here to protect the most vulnerable. And, you know, of course, the opposite is what's happening here, right? And so I think that also now me and some of the folks that I know are becoming angry. Like we never expect, and anger is not a bad thing, but I mean anger in an unproductive way. Let's put it that way, where it's just sort of like, okay, the federal government, they're the aggressors. They're not going to help us, right? But then it's just sort of like state and local governments, excuse my French, what the fuck? Like, what can you do something? I don't want another press conference. I don't want, like, you need to do something though. I know that government is always trying to catch up to the conditions, the social conditions on the ground, particularly for the most vulnerable. But like, now's the time. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Yeah. I mean, to start with your question, Stan, you're noticing something that is so, it is economic terrorism, right? It is what's coupled with the state terror is this like targeted, it's all part of the same thing, right? It's making people's lives unlivable. It's making it so that people are increasingly vulnerable. And the only thing that is keeping people afloat is this mutual aid network that is hard, right? Like it is not sustainable. It can't be sustained actually, and that, because it is on such a large scale. It can't be our only alternative to a functioning safety net. But of course, it is the only thing we have. But so, you walk down Lake Street, which is in our neighborhood. It's a corridor that goes across South Minneapolis, and folks are probably familiar with parts of it because it's where the 3rd precinct was that was burned during the uprising. But along the Lake Street corridor are immigrant-owned businesses, are, laundromats and pottery shops and all of these like, places that are the heart of community, and they're all shut, and they'll unlock the door for you to go in, and maybe they are just shut and they've been shut, and that is because their workers are vulnerable, whether or not their workers are here with legal documentation or not, right? Like that is immaterial to any of this. And it has never been material to any part of this. It is truly just a kind of chaotic, on purpose, indiscriminate smash and grab of anybody who is brown and anybody who resists them. Like I think the other piece of it that probably Shannon and we have become inured to is just the fact that it's also fucking terrifying. You are driving after them or you drive past them in their like massive SUVs. And I had a moment where I was participating in in observation. And, I had a like really strong realization that I was doing something that got somebody killed a, a, the day before, and, I have these little kids that I have a responsibility to be here for. And, and also we have a responsibility to our neighbors' kids. And, um, the, the scale that we're talking about is both like so overwhelming, and also it is really worth like replicating. This is not a like organization led, you know, resistance. The fact that like at every school there are hundreds and hundreds of parents that are doing daily patrols, that are giving rides, that are bringing groceries, that are raising rent funds, that are keeping each other, that are the safety net, and this like really effective rapid response network that is not preventing abductions, but it is actually preventing a lot of abductions, right? Which is just could not work unless people were just out. So that when ICE is observed, they are there, like it within, because it's so fast. It's different than how it was 6 months ago, right? Where like ICE is targeting an individual, and so they have gotten information about where that individual might be and are waiting for that individual. It's not like that anymore, right? They're just grabbing people and they don't give a shit who they are, right? They're just like poop, doop, doop. I'm going to knock your car window in and literally drag you out of your car window, and it's not targeted, and so it happens, 90 seconds and it's done, and so none of that would be known were there not people who were following them. We're not keeping a like massive database of rental car license plates that have been confirmed ICE. If we didn't have the level of organization that we have around, all the 70-year-old Lutheran ladies practicing their Army letter, Alpha Tango Foxtrot. It is, I mean, genuinely like impressive and replicable because it's not organization led. It's very, grassroots and dispersed.
You had mentioned earlier, but you were going to explain how you got to the level you are. In other words, you have this network that's really working and functioning well. And I understand Shannon's exhaustion because, I mean, are the numbers of your group increasing, decreasing? Because, you're talking about 3 months. And 3 months of doing something hard and heavy can weigh on you. Also, my other second question is, have people in your organization become targets?
So, Myrl, you go first.
I just wanted to frame it for you and then have you answer if as you were going to. But the one thing that I wanted to say before we get into the present moment is that this is where I think George Floyd and the organizing that happened after the uprising, which in and of itself actually built on organizing that happened after Jamar Clark was killed in 2014, which really like developed the language and the analysis among young people for thinking about abolition, for thinking about defunding, for thinking about mutual aid. Before those frameworks kind of came into, as I see from my students, like much more mainstream, sort of parlance, the language and the actual relationships, the organizing that happened over those two, like campaigns, crises. And then, of course, like earlier than that, right? South Minneapolis is the birthplace of the American Indian movement. Has always had communities, because of the way that they have continued to be targeted, have needed to have mutual aid networks for people who are locked out of what might be a social safety net for other people, right? So like none of this would be possible were it not for those earlier legacies. And I do think that on a concrete level, part of what's happening is building on the networks and the analysis and the solidarities that were grown 6 and 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And I mean, I haven't personally studied, you know, a lot of, sort of the ICE incursions in other cities. I've, of course, watched in horror, like the different, sort of like news media and individuals covering things. Um, but one thing that I have heard is that, it's just in other places that ICE has come, where the resistance hasn't been as effective as it is here, and, you know, in places like, Chicago, let's say, is like that when you have an easily sort of identifiable leadership or leaders, it does become easier um, to, sort of diffuse the resistance. And I think like the pods, right, the organizing that's going on both like in terms of neighborhoods. So there's neighborhood pods, right? And then there's also um, school-based organizing. There's a lot of organizing going on in church. Like people aren't waiting for for anybody to invite them to do stuff, right? Like they're just like, okay, like we need to do this some kind of way. Where can I get plugged in? Oh, there's no place to get plugged in. I guess I'm creating a sanctuary school team. I mean, I don't think anybody in Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, I wasn't looking. I am so busy. I wasn't looking. I know Myrl's busy. we Nobody was looking for anything extra to do, right? But it's just like you see something that is just like so obviously out of control wrong, and you're just like, okay, whatever I can do, whatever my skills might be useful, then I'm going to offer that. And so yeah, I think that also with Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, we had a campaign already this fall, where we sort of allied ourselves with the Minneapolis Federation of Educators for their contract negotiations, specifically around class sizes. And so that already, then we had teams at different schools already. The infrastructure was already there to then create these sanctuary school teams, and then build out rapid response networks from there. The other thing that I would say has been super helpful for us from the get-go is like how generous folks who have had ICE come to their towns have been with us about their methods of resistance. So Chicago, especially, super, super generous and helpful. I mean, those folks, I remember when ICE first arrived here, it was like, there was like 3 ICE watch trainings a week, and they were super helpful. So yeah.
Really quickly, thank you so much, Shannon, Myrl, and Kat, for your shares. Looks like we have a question from the chat before we can pose other ones as a cohort here. We have Trisha that is asking, what policy change would make the biggest difference right now for protecting the vulnerable community?
So
If can do you mind? Can I just because broadly, um, I part of King Week we did a data panel, right? It was on data of state violence, and part of that was like policies that we've gotten passed to make that happen in the state of California. And I answered the questions. I was a good panelist for the first 45 minutes, and then I threw my book to the side and I said, and none of this means shit. It absolutely means fucking nothing right now, right? There's already a policy around what you are and are not supposed to do with immigration and detention. There's already a policy that says you can't snatch people out of their windows and throw them in a van. There's already policies about deploying ICE and the military and other federal um, uh, entities to attack their own people. Policy exists. We're not living in the policy world. When Trump took office for the second time, I was in a lot of different rooms. The most useful question out of all of those rooms that I sat in was what is still available to us as organizers? What tools are still available to us as organizers? Are the courts still available to us as organizers? Are the laws still available to us as organizers? And I would posit that in this moment, the answer to that is no. We have seen this president even thumb his nose at court rulings and do what he wants to do anyway. That doesn't mean that you don't continue to go through the machinations for those who have the luxury of that kind of time so that there's a record. It's a mistake, I feel strongly, to look to policy and elected officials as the only road to interrupting this. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier. We cannot get free with the master's tools, to quote Audre Lorde. And I don't know that that has ever resonated so deeply with me as it does now. This is really about the time for people to organize themselves. The thing that made the breakfast program, the Black Panther Party, the most dangerous threat to national security, according to J. Edgar Hoover, was not that kids were being fed, is that Black people were beginning to understand that they did not have to rely on their oppressor to eat. And once you start to understand that you do not have to rely on your oppressor to eat, for clothing, for shelter, for shit, all of a sudden that boot on your neck that was stopping you from fighting for your liberation goes away. And that's what made them a threat. And that is where we need to be going now. And just really quickly, because I know we're running out of time. I also, I have to say something about Black immigrants and Black migrants who are being disappeared nationally from the conversation. Um, Black immigrants live in Black neighborhoods that are already flooded with law enforcement and are already being snatched up by cops just for being Black and breathing. And so I just want to shout out Black Alliance for Just Immigration and Baji. I want to shout out Priority Africa Network, and I want to encourage us to continue to talk about Black folks that are being disappeared, hunted, targeted, deported as well in this moment. And I'll shut up now and let the other folks round out their finish, conclude the panel. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Go,
Kat.
Shannon. Shannon, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I agree with you that, especially in like you know, the phase of capitalism that we're in and the phase of like declining empire that we're in, I definitely think that, mutual aid networks are essential. But I mean, I'm finding out like, and it's not a theoretical thing. I'm a very, I'm an intellectual myself. I'm a writer. I love ideas, but it's embodied for me right now that like this level of engagement in um, collecting resources and redistributing them is not sustainable for us on this scale. Every day, I feel that in my body, you know? And so, we do need government, you know, in some ways, like we do. I know that. And so it can be a both and. It can definitely be a both and. Um, but yeah, like, and before this happened, right? Like the administration got rid of SNAP, right? Like that for whatever 2 or 3 months or whatever, and like that's another thing, right? Like, so I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but yeah.
Wanted just as a sort of point of order, note that I want to respect our guests' time and move toward wrapping up in the next few minutes. I also want to make sure that all three of our guests know that the door is always open. If they ever want to join any of our upcoming panels tomorrow, we have Dukes Bokar Ba, who is an economist and is thinking in economic terms about some of these exact things that we're concluding on right now. And it's for me, it's always a learning experience. I'll shut up quickly, actually, very quickly, because I want to give our guests a chance to add any final notes. But I know that these are mighty and massive conversations that I hope that we can continue. And I really just want to emphatically note that as Kat has learned, we always want to hear from you whenever you're able to join us from Minneapolis, from Oakland. and everywhere about these urgent matters. So Myrl, Shannon, Kat, thank you for joining us, and please jump in for any closing thoughts.
Thank you so much. I actually have to go pick up my kids, so this is our life. But thank you so much for the forum and just the space to share information. It's super important, especially it's always important, but I feel like it's really important right now. So really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Me as well. Thank you to Jeremy and Kat and Shannon. This has been a really useful and filling me up conversation. So thank you.
Thanks for having me back. That doesn't happen all the time. So I appreciate you. I appreciate these conversations. I appreciate actually that you all are an educational institution that has decided to continue to have these conversations post 2021 when a lot of folks stopped wanting to have them. And so that's why every time you ask, I say yes, because it's so important that we've got you all. So thank you.
We're very lucky. And thanks, Stan and Amber. It's always a delight to be in conversation with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
See you again
Thank
soon.
you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Conversations on Race and Policing has been supported by funding from the California State University San Bernardino College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, Faux Library, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Finn Lee is our technical consultant. Pamela Crossan provides administrative support, and Alan Yavor provides communication support. There's more information in the show notes, and please join us online at csusb.edu/CORP for upcoming programming and to find our catalog of over 100 past events with guests like Robin D.G. Kelly, Jamal Bowman, Dorothy Roberts, and many more.